This episode was originally a live conversation recorded at the Founders Tap in September 2023.
One thing investors want to see is customers, because that is basically the credibility that there is a market for your product. Now the question is, how do you attract customers when your product is not yet ready, right? So it's a chicken and egg problem, but you have to start somewhere.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. If you enjoy listening to our show, make sure to follow the podcast and leave a rating. And now, here's your host, Anselma.
Thank you, Liliane, for being here. So Liliane, as Nico mentioned, is the co-founder and CEO of Exnaton. Exnaton's mission is to empower energy providers and their customers to efficiently make the switch to renewable energies. To that end, they provide B2B software services for energy billing to energy providers, and we'll get more into it later on as to what Exnaton does and how they do it differently. Also, Exnaton has raised 3 rounds. Their latest funding was raised in September of last year from a seed round. Exnaton is funded by 3 VC funds, also the Technology Fund, and a handful of business angels. True Ventures, which is a huge Silicon Valley fund, and Uber Morgan Ventures from Zurich are their most recent investors. So Liliane, you've also been with us as well in 2021. And ever since the last interview you had with Swisspreneur, a lot has changed. You have now 20 people in the company and as well as 20 customers, big customers across 4 different countries. So how has this changed for you? Like, how has this process impacted you?
Thanks for having me, first of all. Thank you for the invitation. Since the beginning of 2021, which when I had the first podcast here with Swisspreneur, obviously many things have happened. I mean, that's like 2.5 years ago. The company grew from 4 people to over 20 people, from 3 customers to 20 customers. And you can imagine this highly impacts founder life as well, because in the beginning, you're doing everything yourself. And after some time, you have people that are contributing to the team's success. And that means that founders are way more into the management role, giving feedback to the team members, distributing tasks, making sure everything is on time. So it really shifts from like this super hands-on experience to like managing a larger team, which comes, of course, also with personal things, because not every team member has its own his or her own personality, and not every team member can be managed in the same way. So it requires more social abilities to manage those people, and then with the customers, also not every customer is alike. They are very different. They have very different expectations, you're just witnessing the whole thing from a higher level at this point in time.
So for those of us, in the audience who hasn't tuned into the previous episode, if you could tell them a bit about Exnaton, what you do and how you do that differently.
Yeah, sure. So we're a software company. We provide software services to utilities. Utilities are the companies that provide you all with your electricity every day. And back in the days, they visited you once a year in your house, would read your electricity consumption from the meter in your basement, and then issue an invoice for you. But now we're now digitalizing the whole energy sector, and we're not relying on one data point a year any longer, but we have connected electricity meters, and we now have time series of your electricity consumption. So we may tell you, well, you use that much of electricity in summer, that much electricity in winter, and you have charged your Tesla this morning. And with all of these different data points, we can empower you to be more energy efficient. And we can also apply different pricing models. And this is where we help utility companies to create more sophisticated invoices, to use dynamic pricing, to also give you incentives to use electricity at times when there is lots of sun and wind producing renewable energy. So in the end, it's about creating a smart energy sector. And we help utility companies with all the complex billing because they are very good at building electricity power lines. They are very good at trading electricity, but software is not their core competence. And this is where we help them.
Excellent. And what are maybe some of the key milestones that you've achieved thus far in the last couple of years?
Well, I mean, we were already talking about team size and customers. Then obviously building a product because a software product doesn't just fall from the sky. You need people to build it. In order to have people who build it, you need money, of course. Money comes either from customers or from investors. And these are basically always the four things you have to adjust when founding a company. So it's basically building a product, building up a team, convincing customers, and access to money.
All right, so let's then head on to the topic of today, which is how do you build a fundable climate tech SaaS product? So how do you ensure like fundability? And, there is also this whole struggle of you want to get to product market fit. At the same time, you want to make sure that your company is fundable as well. And especially when we're talking about a company which has a mission behind it, which is climate conscious. How do you make sure of that?
Yeah, I mean, one thing investors want to see is customers, because that is basically the credibility that there is a market for your product. Now the question is, how do you attract customers when your product is not yet ready, right? So it's a chicken and egg problem, but you have to start somewhere. In our case, we were lucky because we founded Exnaton right after our PhD at ETH Zurich. We have built the first prototype during that time, and we were basically then transforming this prototype in a production software. And we've already had one customer from this PhD time. So this was the first proof that there is a market out there. But I mean, honestly speaking, signing the first 3 more customers was really, really hard. And especially in our sector, we're selling to these large companies. It's like elephant versus a mouse. Those are large corporates, and them ordering a product like ours takes 12 to 18 months. So, and this is time you don't have as a startup. So you really have to try to speed this up, and you just have to be lucky with a few of those deals, sign them, and then investors, believe more in you, and this makes your company fundable. This whole a product that a customer somehow wants.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, in order to find this product market fit as well, you've got to convince, growingly eco-conscious, eco-savvy customers that you're not also just, greenwashing your way through it. So how did you go about that as well?
Yeah, I think in our case, greenwashing was never that much of a thing because our customers understand quite well what we're doing and how this contributes to the clean energy movement. So for them, this was never the issue. Because it's just so obvious that we're in renewable energy. But I know it from many other companies that are selling products in similar fields. And also for them, it's sometimes that they really feel it, that their customers are only buying them to say that they are doing something in terms of the in terms of CO2 impact. And then this is obviously also frustrating because those customers typically just pilot with you, and then it's over for them because they just need the social media content or a press release that states they have done something green. And this is super sad.
So do you think that investors also see that like very clearly, like the difference in sort of what is the core of your product, if it is really beneficial, or if it is more of kind of a superficial greenwash kind of product? Or do you think they don't care as long as there's money coming in? Controversial question.
It depends. No, I mean, there's certainly investors out there that see the difference. There's also funds out there that require their portfolio companies to submit CO2 reports. So we, for example, we have to submit our CO2 savings, just like we have to show our revenue numbers. So there is definitely funds out there that take it very seriously. On the other side, there's certainly also funds that say they would like to invest in green startups, but revenue is then way more important than the CO2 impact. So it always depends. And we're also seeing that many funds, I mean, when we started 3 years ago, green energy wasn't a hot topic at all. It really kicked off last year with the whole energy crisis as well. And back then, nobody would have ever invested in energy startups. This has definitely changed last year. And we're seeing that more and more funds are really interested in the topic. And now it's the question, why are they interested in it? Do they really want to create impact, or is it just another hype, right? And I think you always have funds out there that mean it very, very serious, and others are just riding the wave, but that's okay. For us as a startup, it's just important to identify the right funds for our mission.
Right. But also then talk a bit about, like, is fundability like desirable? Like, how much can you achieve if you go that route versus if you bootstrap, and where does that cap you out?
I mean, again, it really, really much depends on the startup, its structure, its ambitions. And I couldn't say that the VC path is the one and only part, or the bootstrapping part is the one and only part. It really always depends. But in our case, I mean, I was just saying our sales cycles are long, so 12 to 18 months. This is quite an investment that we're investing into the relationship with a potential customer. And that's why we need external funding for sure.
Yeah, and your and your investors are aware of it. They're on board with it, of course.
Exactly.
But how does it work? Like, because when you are VC backed, there is also a fine line between making impact and then making progress that they need to see. Yeah. Versus when you're bootstrapped, you could be making more impact, but maybe not as much revenue or profit. So which one, in your opinion? For obviously for you guys, you definitely went the VC backed route, but did you have to compromise anywhere while trying to do it like that?
I mean, you obviously have to compromise on some things. For one, or first thing, obviously founder shares. Of course, you sell shares. That's just the way it is, but that's totally fine, because I appreciate their support a lot. So the money really enabled us to grow fast, to hire a great team that is building the product in a faster way. And also their experience is just very, very helpful. I mean, they warn you about the macroeconomic situation. They have very good advice on what to do and what not to do. And I think if you're bootstrapping, you're kind of, or you might miss these tips, these recommendations from time to time, or you have to make at least sure how to get this kind of input from other sources like startup coaches, other founders, and so on. But you really want to make sure you're profiting from someone else's mistakes before by not doing them again. And this is for us just a great source. But then with regards to your question, impact versus revenue. I mean, ideally, you have a product that creates impact and that customers want, and therefore that creates revenue, and those two positive outcomes are very, very much correlated. That's the ideal situation for us, for our product. It definitely is like this. The more we sell, the more impact we create, and it's just a nice circle. And so we didn't have to compromise on that.
And what were some of the things apart from the money? Like you said, you get ton of support as well, being VC backed. So if you could talk about it in particular, being climate tech and the SaaS product, like where else did you find support from them?
I mean, obviously, how to run a company, how to set up everything, what kind of KPIs should we look out for, what kind of bad KPIs are a warning that something is not correct here, where do you have to counter steer. So these are very, very good, or is very good support. Some VCs might even introduce you to your future customers if they have a very strong network to your customer segment as well. So this can be super helpful. They connect you to other founders, which is also great. Our American VC hosts very, very good coaching programs for startups. So they basically have hired coaches all over America, and they are providing us with these coaching training camps and so on. So it's the support is very, very different between the different funds, but overall very, very helpful.
All right.
This episode was produced in cooperation with the ETH Entrepreneur Club, a student organization which aims to inspire, educate, and empower the next generation of entrepreneurs. The ETH Entrepreneur Club holds more than 40 events every year, resulting in an impressive alumni list of successful startups. If you want to keep up with their busy agenda, make sure to give them a follow on social media.
And then, climate tech is a hot topic now. Green finance is also all the rage. How can then a product like yours stand out from the crowd? And then if you can also shed some light, like if you've seen it over the last few years, is it now easier than ever to be a climate tech product and get funded?
Well, very good question. So where do I start? I mean, you cannot compare a climate tech product to another climate tech product, right? It's just like you cannot compare two fintech products with each other, but you really have to dive deep into the category and to carve out your USP. I mean, for us, it's very clear, this billing aspect. We are very, very good at handling time series energy data, processing the data, tariffing data, aggregating data. So it's all about time series in our case, and then visualizing data and just supporting the utilities with these software capabilities. That's what we're good at. But other climate tech startups, I mean, look at Climeworks. They are taking CO2 out of the atmosphere, right? Others are producing meat alternatives. So it's just the variety is super large. And then you just have to see what makes you stand out from your competition. That's just something you have to define along the way. And then, which was the second part of the question?
Was it that, is it easier now to in the current state of affairs? I mean, there's two things going on, right? One is we are facing an economic downturn. So largely startups are not getting that easily funded. Everyone's like, hang in there. You go to an event, you ask them and they're like, just hang in there. That's going on the one side. Then you also have SaaS products, which typically are more interesting for VCs. They get success easier. Yeah. So that's one part of it. Then the third part is being a climate tech product, which is also, as we mentioned, a hot topic in today's time. It's relevant, of course. So how is it like now for you in this situation that we're in and that I described? is it easier to get funded now versus a few years ago?
Well, I would say for us right now, it's definitely easier than 3 years ago, because 3 years ago, energy was just a regulated market that investors were certainly not interested in, even though it's a SaaS product. But investors are skeptical when the market depends on national regulation, and in the energy sector you always have the regulator that is coming up with new laws. So this is where investors are a bit skeptical, but this has definitely changed, especially with the events in Eastern Europe at the beginning of last year. But I would also say before that, climate tech startups were getting more and more attractive. So I would say 2021 was probably kind of the changing point here. But now we're facing an economic downturn, and it's definitely harder to attract money right now than it was last year or than it was 1.5 years ago. I mean, I cannot say for sure because we haven't raised this year.
Yeah.
We raised last year, and last year it went quite well for us. We haven't tried this year, so that's something I cannot judge from personal experience. I can only judge it from other energy startups out there, and we have seen great rounds this year in the energy sector as well. Probably if you compare it to other sectors, I think the energy sector right now is receiving a little bit more money than compared to last year, or like in this peer group comparison. So I think overall it's still okay for energy startups, but we don't know how long this economic downturn will last. And it's hard to make these predictions here.
Right. And how has it impacted you in terms of customer acquisition? Is that going same? Is it slower or better?
Yeah, that's also a very good question. I mean, in our case, we definitely have seasonal effects. So for us, the second half of the year is always way better than the first half of the year, which is interesting, but it's just how it is in our sector.
Because their bigger companies do their budget planning in second half of the year for the coming year?
Yes, and they have to spend budget as well. And I just have the feeling that in the first months of the year, they are more busy with starting projects than planning new projects. So this is definitely a trend that we're seeing. In general, I would say the crisis from last year accelerated us in certain ways. At the other side, it also de-accelerated us because there were new laws introduced, and whenever there's a new law introduced, our customers are a bit shocked about the consequences, don't know how to handle their internal operations. So it's good and bad, but I would say overall it's good.
All right. So last couple of questions before we then open it up to the audience. One is that, how has the liberalization of European energy markets influenced the growth and adoption of Exnaton services?
Yeah, sure. I mean, let's talk about market liberalization. What does it mean?
Yes.
So in Switzerland, the electricity market is not liberalized, at least not for households. That means, I guess some of you live here in Zurich, so you're automatically customers of EWZ and you receive their electricity from them. If you're from a EU country, you might have experienced the market liberalization in the earlier 2000s. That meant that you could now choose your electricity provider, and opening up such a monopolistic market certainly brings more competition into the market, new products, and these utilities in Germany, Austria, Italy, and so on, they try to win you as customers. They try to offer a very good service, and they are very dedicated. And that's always good for innovation because it creates new products, new ideas, and I'm a big fan of it, of course. I mean, I want to bring the sector forward with new green products. That's why a liberalized market is very good for us. And then the customers are just more receptive to innovative ideas.
Perfect. And then the other thing is, the evolving regulatory landscape. for companies like yours, you do have to at times adapt to these regulatory changes. And how does that affect then as well what you have in plan and what you have also promised to the investors?
Yeah, I mean that's a double-sided sword, of course, because a new law might speed you up totally because utilities must do something new, but they cannot basically stem it from the inside because they don't know how to do it. They don't have the capabilities. On the other side, it might slow you down because they are in this moment of shock and cannot move at all and just have to take care of their customer support, which actually happened at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
So we always have these two things. But I think you should always see it as a chance. If there's a new regulation upcoming, I mean, you must know about it. So you must monitor the regulation closely, but it can be a super large chance for you. At the same time, you should not base all of your products on some regulations because what if the regulation changes? Then your company might not be there any longer because the products are useless. So I think you have to find the right balance. But especially in the energy sector, we have to get used to markets that are a bit more regulated, and investors also have to get used to that. And there's so many investors that want to do good and want to invest in energy because it's such a huge topic for human mankind, and they will get used to it. They will come up with further KPIs other than revenue as well. As we've seen, there's first funds that really pin you down on your CO2 impact. They will also realize that the e-commerce SaaS KPIs might not be applicable to climate tech startups. It just takes a little bit of time, but I'm very, very positive that we have good investment cases in this sector, and that many investors will love working together with climate tech startups as well.
Great. So as a final word of advice to entrepreneurs who want to build climate tech or energy or SaaS products, what would you want to share?
Yeah, well, I mean that's a huge question. I mean, I was already saying that as any kind of startup, you have these 4 pillars that you are dependent on, which is a product, a team, customers, and money, investors. And you want to make sure that you're screwing all these screws at the right time with the right speed so that they all kind of interact with each other and you're coming into this upward movement, right? Special recommendations to climate tech startups, to energy startups is really to find the right investors that really support your mission, that also value your CO2 impact and that are not purely focused on revenue. On the other side, it's also very important that you're making revenue with your company because you want to hire a team, you want to grow the company. And at the end of the day, you might motivate your team members a lot with your green mission. I mean, for us, it's amazing to see how the team members are thriving in this environment. That's super, super cool. But at the end of the month, they also want to receive their salary, right? So it's just it's a hard fact, and you have to make sure you're viable in that sense. But I think finding the right investors is very important. Believing in your mission is very important. And finding the right customers that are willing to pay for your product, are not just greenwashing, and that also provide you with great feature requests that make your product better. I think if you have a good combination of that, then you can be successful.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and insights with us today. Was really nice to hear. I always learn something when I'm on the stage.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Please give it up for Liliane.
This episode was brought to you by Google Cloud, a partner that needs no introduction. What you might not have heard of, though, is that Google offers a Google for Startups cloud program where they give you access to startup experts, technical training, business support, and cover your Google Cloud costs up to $200,000 for 2 years, or even $350,000 if you're an AI startup. Scale your startup faster and smarter with Google Cloud. Head over to goo.gle/Swisspreneur.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.